Since substance is posited and not given in intuition, as essences may be given, substance is external to the thought which posits it. Since it is posited in action, or in readiness for action, the substance posited is external not merely to the positing thought, as a different thought would be, but is external to the physical agent which is the organ of that action, as well as of that thought. In other words, substance has parts and constitutes a physical space. Conversely, the substantial agent in action and thought is external to the surrounding portions of substance with which it can interact. All the parts of substance are external to one another. Since substance is engaged in action, and action involves change, substance is in flux and constitutes a physical time. Changes are perpetually occurring in the relations of its parts, if not also in their intrinsic characters. Since the agents in action and reaction are distinct in position and variable in character, and since they induce changes in one another, substance is unequally distributed. It diversifies the field of action or physical time and space. Since there is no occasion for positing any substance save as an agent in the field of action, all recognizable substance must lie in the same field in which the organism of the observer occupies a relative center. Therefore, wherever it works and solicits recognition, substance composes a relative cosmos. A mutual externality, or Ausein Andersine, an alternation of centers such as moment and moment, thing and thing, place and place, person and person, is characteristic of existence. Each center is equally actual and equally central, yet each is dependent on its neighbors for its position and on its predecessors for its genesis. The existential interval from one center to another is bridged naturally by generation or motion, by a transition actually taking place from one moment, place, or character to another, in such a manner that the former moment, place, or character is abandoned and lost. The same interval may still be bridged cognitively by faith or intent, cognition being a substitute for a transition which cannot be executed materially, because the remote term of it is past or not next in the order of genesis or transformation. But this interval can never be bridged by synthesis and intuition. Synthesis and intuition destroys the existential status of the terms which it unites, since it excludes any alternation or derivation between them. It unites at best the essences of some natural things into an ideal picture. On the other hand, the conjunction of essences in nature must always remain successive, external, and unsynthesized. Nature shows no absolute limits and no privileged partitions, whereas the richest intuition, the most divine omniscience, is imprisoned in the essence which it beholds. It cannot break through into existence unless it loses itself and submits to transition, and the foretaste or aftertaste of such transition, present in feeling, must posit something eventual, something absent from intuition, if even this sense or idea of existence is to arise at all. Then the mind engaged in action may begin to live by faith in the outlying conditions of life, and by an instinctive tension towards obscure events. It might seem that memory eludes this necessity, and actually encloses some parts of the past in the present, and brings the movement of events bodily within the circle of intuition. But this is an illusion founded on the fact that memory contains both imagery and knowledge. The imagery is all present, but that of which it gives knowledge, when memory is true, is past and gone. Even if, by a rare favor, the original aspect of the past experience should be reproduced exactly, It will not be the past event, nor even the present one, that will be given in intuition, but the dateless essence common to both. The cognitive value of this apparition will hang on the ulterior fact that such an apparition, or the event which it reports, occurred before, at a point of time which was its own center, and not a marginal feature in the present perspective. Memory, then, in so far as it is, or even claims to be, knowledge, is faith in the absent, and bridges external relations by intent only, not by synthesis and intuition. A mutual externality is also requisite among the instances of spirit, that is, among thoughts that are to be regarded as existences and events. This, at first sight, might seem contrary to the apparent self-existence and self-evidence of conscious being, and to the transcendental status of spirit, which, because it is a logical counterpart to any datum, might be alleged to be an omnipresent fact, existing absolutely. But this, although it may pass for criticism, is the sophistry of reflection, which can readily take its verbal terms for existences or substances, and ignore the natural springs of feeling and of reflection itself. An instance of spirit, a pure feeling or intuition, if it had no date or place in nature, would not be an event or existence at all, but only another name, and a mythical name, for the essence conceived to be present there. The life of thought, in its conscious intensity, lies in the synthesis which it is perpetually making among its changing materials. These acts of synthesis, these glances and insights, are historical facts. They arise and are distinguishable on the level of experience from their material conditions, but they are not substances. Their substance is their organ in its movement and in its changing tensions. It is the psyche. The case is like that of a collision between two vehicles, or checkmate in a game of chess. The collision is a new fact on the plane of human affairs, as is the checkmate which ends the game. So, too, are the chagrin or the severe pain which these events may occasion. But the pain or the chagrin could no more arise or come into existence without the living persons who endure them, persons moving in the realm of matter, than the checkmate could occur without the match, or the collision without the vehicles. If a feeling or thought is to be actual, and not a metaphorical name for some eternal essence, it must therefore arise out of material events, and in the midst of them it must stand in external relations. Thus, the first indispensable condition for the being of substance is indispensable also to any form of existence, mental or historical as well as physical. Existence, like substance, is essentially diffuse and many-centered. One fact can be reached cognitively from another fact only by faith, and materially only by transition, and the cognitive or the initial fact itself can exist only by virtue of its position or action in a natural system extending beyond it. It follows that substance is in flux, virtual if not actual. External relations are such as are due to the position, not to the inherent character of the terms. They are, therefore, always variable, and existence, although it may endure by accident for any length of time, is inherently mortal and transitory, being adventitious to the essences which figure in it. When Hamlet says, to be or not to be, he is pondering the alternative between existence and non-existence, and feeling the contingency of both. The question is not whether he shall be or not be Hamlet. Death might cause him to forget his essence, but could not abolish it or transform it into another essence. In the realm of essence, all these essences are eternally present and no alternative arises, which is perhaps the ultimate truth conveyed by the doctrine of the eternal salvation or punishment. But the accidents of death or dreams or oblivion continually confront this life. and existence is an optional form of being. Shall this beloved or detested essence presently lose it? And on what other essence shall it fall next? To this pressing question the realm of essence supplies no answer, and the contemplative mind is hopelessly puzzled by it. Solvitur ambulando, the vent, the propulsive currents of substance merging and rushing into new forms, will perpetuate a solution without ever considering alternatives. It is perhaps because they never stop to think before they act that they are able to act at all. Something, not essence, then, actualizes and limits the manifestation of every essence that figures in nature or appears before the mind. To this dark principle of existence we give the name of substance. So that substance, by definition, is the soil, the medium, and the creative force which secretly determines any option like that of Hamlet. Every such option is momentary and local, for although substance is external to essence and to thought, and its parts are external to one another, yet substance is internal to the things which it forms by occupying those contrasted places and assuming these various qualities. It is their substance, the principle of their existence, the ground of all the spontaneous changes which they undergo. It is indefinitely, perhaps infinitely, deep and inhuman. But whatever else its intrinsic essence may be, it is certainly complex, local, and temporal. Its secret flux involves at least as many contrasts and variations as the course of nature shows on the surface. Otherwise, the ultimate core of existence would not exist, and the causes of variation would not vary. But how shall that which puts on the specious essence here and not there be in the same inner condition in both places? Or how shall that which explodes now have been equally active before? Substance, if it is to fulfill the function in virtue of which it is recognized and posited, must accordingly be forever changing its own inner condition. It must be in flux. Undoubtedly, the word substance suggests permanence rather than change, because the substances best known to man, like the milk and the wet sand of the young architect, evidently pass from place to place and from form to form while retaining their continuity in quantity. Such permanence is not contrary to flux, but a condition of flux. The degree of permanence which substance may have in any particular process, and the name which should be given to this permanent factor, are questions for scientific discussion. They may not, and need not, receive any ultimate answer, but that some permanence, not the casual persistence of this or that image, is interwoven with the flux of things, follows from the reality of this flux itself. If change were total at any point, their transformation and existence would come to an end. The next completely new fact would not be next. It would be the center or the beginning of a separate world. In other words, events, if they are to be successive or contiguous, must be pervaded by a common medium, in which they may assume relations external to their respective essences. For the internal or logical relations between these essences will never establish any succession or continuity among them, nor transport them at all into the sphere of existence. The critics of empiricism, who have insisted that a series of sensations is not the sensation of a series, might well have added that the sensation of a series is no more than an isolated term on its own account, unless there is a background common to those terms and to this synthetic idea, a background in relation to which they may respectively take such places as shall render them contiguous or successive, although there is nothing within any of them to indicate such a position. This background for human perception is the field of vision symbolizing the field of action. In this specious field, the position of objects is distinguished before the objects are clearly specified or posited. But this unity of perspective relative to the momentary station and thought of the observer cannot embrace the existential flux itself, in which the events reported and the observer with his thought are incidental features. For the continuity and successiveness of this existing series, synthesis and apprehension is useless. It merely creates one more item, a living thought, to be ranged among its neighbors in the flux of existence. That which is requisite is the natural derivation of one phase in this flux from another, or a natural tension between them, determining their respective characters and positions. Such derivation and such tension, essential to action, involve a substance within or between events. There may be very much more in substance than that, but this is enough to disclose the existence of a substance, and to begin the human description of it by its functions. Permanence, therefore, need not be set down separately among the radical properties attributed to substance. It is sufficiently expressed in the possibility of change, of continuity, of succession, and of the inclusion of actual events in a natural series, which shall not be a mere perspective in imagination. Action and animal faith look in some specific direction. The butt of action, which is what I call substance, must be particular, local, and circumscribed. It must be capable of varying its position or its condition, for otherwise I could neither affect it by my action, nor await and observe its operation. In battle, in the chase, or in labor, attention is turned to a particular quarter, something substantial there. It would defeat all action in art if all quarters were alike, and if I couldn't face a fact without turning my back on exactly the same fact in the rear, and the price of bread would be indifferent. If one substance being everywhere present, I could find the same substance in the air. Action evidently would be objectless in an infinite vacuum or a homogeneous plenum, and even the notion or possibility of action would vanish if I, the agent, had not distinguishable parts, so that at least I might swim forward rather than backward in that dense vacuity. A field of action must, then, be diversified substantially, not pictorially only. That which is at work in it here must not be equally at work in it there. The opportunities which it opens to me now must not be the same which it opened and will open always. Any conception of substance which represents it as undivided and homogeneous is accordingly not a conception of nature or of existence. And if such an object is ever called substance, it must be in a metaphysical sense which I do not attach to the word. One test of such evasions into the realm of essence is ability or ambition to give a precise definition of what substance is. Materia prima may be defined. Plotinus has an admirable exposition of it, like the Athanasian Creed, because it is avowedly something incapable of existence, and at best one of those ideal terms which serve to translate nature into the language of thought. Materia prima is a grammatical essence, comparable to the transcendental ego, the I think, which, according to Kant, must accompany all experience. The discrimination of such essences distinguishes one logic from another, and leaves everything in nature, except human language, just as it was. The existing substance of things, on the contrary, is that which renders them dynamic. It is wherever dynamic things are, not where they are not. It determines their aspects and powers, and we may learn, since it exists in us also, to play with it and to let it play on us in specific ways. But it would be frivolous to attempt to define it, as if a set of words or of blinking ideas could penetrate to the heart of existence and determine how, from all eternity, it must have been put together. What we may discover of it is not its essence, but its place, its motion, its aspects, its effects. Were an essence given an intuition, a visionary presence to sense or to language, it would forfeit those functions which compel us to posit it, and which arrest its formidable reality. Chief of these functions is a perpetual and determinate revolution in the heavens, and fertility and decay upon earth. In this flux there is relative permanence and continuity, but substance is not for that reason less agitated than the familiar face of nature, or nearer to the impassibility of an eternal essence. Far otherwise. Investigation rather shows that this substance, which may be traced experimentally in many of its shifts, is in a continual silent ferment, by which gross visible objects are always being undermined and transformed, so much so that science often loses its way amid those subtle currents of the elements, and stops breathless at some too human image. There are certain celebrated doctrines which, in their forms of expression, are excluded at once from natural philosophy by these considerations. I may not say, for instance, with Parmenides, that being is and not being is not, if what I am seeking to describe is the substance of nature. If for dialectical reasons, which are not directly relevant to physics, I wish to regard pure being as the essence of matter, I should be compelled to distribute this pure being unequally in a void, a result which would contradict my premise that not being is not, since this void would not only exist but would be the only true theater of existence, because it would be the only seat of change. The pure being or matter distributed in it by hypothesis is impassible and everywhere identical. Nature and life would therefore be due to the redistribution in the bosom of not being of a pure being in itself immutable. We should thus be led to the system of Democritus, a possible and even a model system of physics, although in its expression too Eleatic and borrowing from that dialectical school a false air of necessity. Similarly, at the threshold of natural philosophy, the Vedanta system must yield to the Sankhya, and this the Indians seem to have admitted by regarding the two systems as orthodox and compatible. It might be well if in the West we could take a hint from this comprehensiveness. The unity and simplicity of pure being is not incompatible with the infinite variety of essences implied in it. And many things are true in the realm of essence, which, if taken to describe existence, would be unmeaning or contrary to fact. It would suffice to distinguish the two spheres more carefully, for the legitimacy of systems, verbally most unlike, to become equal, although certainly those which were drawn from insight into essence would be more profound and unshakable than those drawn from observation of nature, since nature might as well have offered quite a different spectacle. On the other hand, it is the order and ground of this spectacle that interests the natural philosopher, and to him that more inward and more sublime intuition of essential being is a waste of time, or a rhetorical danger. One more illustration. The language of Spinoza about substance ought to yield, in physics, to that of Aristotle, in spite of the fact that a follower of Descartes could not help being more enlightened in mechanical matters than a follower of Socrates. Nevertheless, it was Aristotle who gave the name of substance to compound natural things actually existing, and Spinoza who bestowed it on an ambiguous metaphysical object, now pure being, now the universe in its infinity. In either case, an ideal unity and an essence incapable of realization all at once, if at all, in any natural locus. No discrimination of infinite being into infinitely numerous attributes would ever generate existence, since all would remain eternal, and no enumeration of the possible modes of each attribute would turn them into particular things or into living minds, since each mode would imply all the others, and all would be equally rooted everywhere. In Aristotle, on the contrary, the name of substance is given where the office of substance is performed, and where one fact here asserts itself against another fact there, so that substance is the principle of individuation and exclusion, the condition of existence, succession, and rivalry amongst natural things. even in these things, as conceived by Aristotle, have too much of an animate unity, and are mysteriously fixed in their genera and species, and redolent of moral suggestions. All this is but the initial dramatic rendering of their human uses, and the poetry of good prose. It does not prevent a more disinterested analysis. Microscopic and telescopic science, from disclosing in time the deeper mechanisms and analogies of nature and its finer substance, just as the static zoology and the political psychology of Aristotle do not prevent us from peeping into the seething elementary passions beneath those classical masks. Things have not ceased to wear the sensuous and moral forms which interested the Greeks, but we may discover how those shells were generated, and what currents of universal substance have cast them up. Finally, the practical intellect, in positing substance, imposes on it a certain relevance to the agent, who is to be in dynamic relations with it. The objects which art and sanity compel me to recognize as substantial must affect me together, even if in very different ways. They must all impinge, directly or indirectly, on my action now, and it is by this test that I distinguish fact from fiction and true memory from fancy. Facts are dynamically connected with that which I now posit as substantial, and objects of fancy are not so connected. The field of animal faith spreads out from a living center. Observation cannot abandon its base, but from this vital station it may extend its perspectives over everything to which it can assign existence. Among these accredited things there may be other centers of observation, actual or eventual, but if the original organ and station, and these other stations and organs accredited by it, were not parts of one and the same substantial world, no means would remain of identifying the objects observed from one center with those observed from another. I can acknowledge the existence of other moral centers in the world which I posit, but only if these centers are agencies, earthly or celestial, at work in my field of action, and dynamically connected with my own existence. All credible animation of ascertainable character must animate substances found in the same world with myself and collateral with my own substance. Perhaps this argument has some analogy to Spinoza's proof of the unity of substance. He tells us that substance is one, because if there were two or more substances, they could bear no relation to one another. In other words, there can be but one universe, since anything outside, by being outside, would be related to it and collateral, and so after all would form a part of it. Yet, if one universe or one substance can exist absolutely and out of all relation to anything else, why should not any number of them exist, each centered in itself? The necessity of lying in external relations in order to exist, far from proving that only one system of facts is possible, proves that any closed circle of facts in interplay with one another and with nothing else will form a complete universe. Each part of this system will exist by virtue of its active position there, and may be discovered by any members of it who are sufficiently intelligent and adventurous. But from no part of that universe will anything beyond that universe be discoverable. Does this fact preclude the being of a different system, a separate universe possessing the same sort of inward life and reality? I cannot think so. Transcendental necessities are relative to particular centers of experience. They have no jurisdiction beyond. Those other universes to us would be undiscoverable, but ours too would be undiscoverable to them, and yet we exist here without their leave. Might they not exist without ours? What logic enables us to assert, therefore, is that there is only one universe, but that each universe must be one by virtue of a domestic economy determining the relative position and character of the events which compose it. Anything beyond this dynamic field is beyond the field of positive existence and possible knowledge. If there are other centers and active substances moving in other spheres, the relation of these disconnected spheres is not a physical relation. No journey and no transformation can bridge it. It lies in the realm of truth. Each of these worlds will exemplify its chosen essence, and the internal and unchangeable relations between these essences will be the only relations between those worlds. One will not exist before the other, nor will they be simultaneous, nor will either lie in any other direction from the other or at any distance. No force or influence will pass between them of any traceable physical or historical kind. If omniscience should see any harmony, contrast, or mutual fulfillment between their natures, that spiritual bond would be of the sort which links essences together by a logical necessity, and which a contemplative spirit may stop, disentangle, and admire if it can and will. Indeed, we may go further and say even of a single universe taken as a whole that its status is that of a truth rather than of an existence. Each part of it will exist, and if animate, may truly feel its internal tension and life, and may truly assert the existence of the other parts also. Yet the whole system, perhaps endless in its time and space, never exists at once or in any assignable quarter. Its existence is only posited from within its limits. Externally, its only status is that of a truth. Its essence was not condemned to be a closet tragedy. Living actors have been found to play it, and a shifting stage to exhibit for a moment those convincing scenes. This essence has therefore the eternal dignity of a truth. It is the complete description of an event. Yet this event, taken as a whole, being unapproachable from outside, dateless and nowhere, is in a sense a supernatural event. Those scenes are undiscoverable, save to those who play them, and that tumult is an ancient secret in the bosom of truth. Indeed, good sense might suffice to convince anyone that no arguments or definitions can prevent things from being as numerous and as separate as they may chance to be. There is an infinite diversity of essences. What shall dissuade the fatality of existence, which must be groundless from composing such changeful systems as it likes, on planes of being utterly incommensurable and incommunicable? The most a man can say for himself, or for any other element from which exploration may start, is that whatever is to enter his field of action must belong to the same dynamic system within himself. In experience and art, as in the nebular hypothesis, this dynamic oneness of the world is primitive. It is not put together by conjoining elements found existing separately, but it is the locus in which they are found. For if they were not found there, they would be essences only and not facts. In mature human perception, the essences given are doubtless distinct, and the objects which they suggest are clearly discriminated. Here is the dog, there the sun, the past nowhere, and the night coming. But beneath all this definition of images and attitudes of expectancy, there is always a voluminous feeble sensibility in the vegetative soul. Even this sensibility posits existence. The contemplation of pure being might supervene only after all alarms, gropings, and beliefs have been suspended, something it takes all the discipline of Indian sages to begin to do. The vegetative soul enjoys an easier and more Christian blessedness. It sees not, yet it believes. But it believes in what? In whatever it may be that envelops it, in what we, in our human language, call space, earth, sunlight, and motion, in the throbbing possibility of putting forth something which we call leaves, for which that patient soul has no name and no image. The unknown total environment is what every intellect posits at birth. Whatever may be attempted in action or discovered in nature will be a fresh feature in that field. Everything relevant to mortal anxiety lies within that immensity, be it an object of earthly fear or pursuit or of religious hope. Animal faith and material destiny move in a relative cosmos.